Hello, and welcome to Musings from the Mystics. I'm Marnie.
And I'm Natalie. We are your guides on this crazy and sometimes tumultuous journey we call the human experience.
Each episode will share our musings about the current energetic climate,
how we're navigating these times,
and tips to help you get the most out of your journey.
So join us to be awakened, empowered,
and expand into conscious action. Hello, and welcome back to our series, Quest for the True You. And this week's mission is resistance. And we're talking about resistance because when we are doing anything different, when there is change, there's this natural thing that happens called resistance. And I think it's really important to talk about because it's also something that's so subconscious. It's so below the surface that we don't even know it's happening.
No, it's an automatic response.
It's an automatic response.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's first talk about what is resistance. So, resistance can mean the ability not to be affected by something, especially adversely. However, for our benefits, we're going to do the other side of that coin, which is...
Well, and there's also the psychological defense mechanism wherein someone regrets, denies, or otherwise opposes therapeutic efforts. That's resistance as well.
Right. Ooh, isn't it though? I have the refusal to accept or comply with something, the attempt to prevent something by action or argument.
And in simple terms, like if you look up resistance, opposition, like that's the one word. If you're not familiar with resistance, you're familiar with opposition. Yeah. So there's some synonyms that might help you wrap your mind around it a little bit more, like aversion to, refusal to accept, an unwillingness to accept, a disinclination to accept, a reluctance to accept, and a lack of enthusiasm for. So even when we want to make like these great changes for ourselves, we will come up against the wall of resistance. And I think it's a natural function of our brain because what does the brain not like? Change. The brain does not like change, even if it's good for us. Yes, and it's also it's that fear mechanism in the brain of the unknown. So it's also fear of unknown, right? Exactly.
It's like, scary. Oh my God, what's gonna happen?
Like even if you're doing the same thing over and over and over again, and it's not serving your best and highest good, it's what's known, and so it becomes a repeating pattern because everybody likes the repetition, and even if it's not fun or not good or any of those things, it's what we know.
And it's comfortable.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Because change does require a lot of us. It requires conscious action, which that's my buzzword. Conscious action. It requires us to say, oh, I'm present in the moment. I recognize what I'm doing and I need to change this behavior because this behavior doesn't serve me, lead me to my dreams, my goals. It doesn't give me what I want, right? So it requires us to, rather than automatically just moving through life in survival mode, it requires us to be attentive and have conscious action. And so we will come up against a lot of resistance when we're doing any kind of changes, even if it's about ourselves, right? We're looking at ourselves.
Absolutely.
We're internally looking at ourselves. Well, the brain does not want to sit and think about, this behavior didn't serve you. This behavior caused some conflict. This behavior created a dissolution of something. And it's your responsibility. No, the brain does not want you to take responsibility.
No, the brain doesn't want to hear anything about that. Like, no. We're just the machine. We're running on that little hamster wheel, going round and round and round, and just
it's someone else's fault.
The same thing, right?
Which is the thing that we have to remember is that is the natural function of the brain, but it doesn't mean it's the best and highest way for us to move through life, which is really what the change is about. Rather than running on autopilot, we are making highest and best choices for ourselves, which are sometimes difficult. But also we run into resistance when we're wanting to do something really great. Like I really want to meditate every night. But what do? We come home, we get on our phone, we sit in front of the TV, we're slumped over, draining our energy, not having conversations with the people we love, not doing what we want to do. And we want to do those things, but then the brain says, no, it won't work. It'll wake you up. It didn't work last time. You'll get interrupted. Right there, brain comes up with 1,000 justifications or excuses for why you should not change and do something different. So it's an important thing to recognize, right? And we can dive into a little bit more about justification, which is basically what we're talking about, this resistance.
Right, because it's all that list of like those pros and cons that we were taught to do, like weighs the pros and cons, and that's your justifications. Like you're weighing the pros and cons, which again, I think as we'll get into justification, but we talked a little bit about why it comes up, but let's talk a little bit about how you know if it's true resistance or if it's really something that's not right for you.
That is so good. Yeah, that's really where the magic is.
Yes. And sometimes it's hard, especially if you're just jumping into this, to decipher like, all right, am I feeling resistance because it's not good for me? Or am I feeling resistance because I'm on autopilot? And those are things that we need to figure out.
Absolutely.
So it's tough. It is tough. But I think this is where your emotions come into it. Like if it's almost like I'm afraid, that's not necessarily a bad thing. But if you are like overwhelmed through the roof, can't even put a thought together, that may be telling you it's not good for you. It's the emotions tell you, we like to say that meditation thing that you were just talking about. Like, I want to do this and it feels good. And you can feel that feeling of feeling good. Just said feels a lot in there. But if you can get to that point, you know that this is probably a good thing for you. So if it feels good in that gut, not in your brain, not in your head, but it resonates with you, then that probably is something that's good for you. You're just having a little bit of resistance to the change.
And really the resolution is to push through that resistance, right? To go, okay, I have resistance to something I really want to do. I'm going to do it anyway. And this is where the work, quote unquote, work comes in, or when it feels hard is because we're having to push past that resistance barrier. That's actually where the hard part is pushing that barrier out. Yeah, I totally agree. And last week we talked about the head versus the heart, and I listed off some ways that the head is running the show. If you're only thinking about logical things, if you're only thinking about fear, if you're only getting answers or information outside of yourself, those are all head focused, and it's time to tap in. And we will touch on intuition and things later down the road, but it's about learning to listen. What do you really want? And listening to the heart, listening to your gut, what feels good to you, not what makes sense in the mind space. Because the mind is going to reject anything new for the most part in varying degrees. So not everything you'll not meet resistance with the same degree of resistance every time. Right. Sometimes it'll be just a little, nope, that's a bad idea. And you're like, I'm going to do it anyway, right?
Right.
But then sometimes it can send you into full-blown anxiety and terror because, oh my God, this is different. It really depends on you as a person.
It does.
And how adept you are at having inner conversations and getting to know yourself. Well, is this my brain just running amok, or is this I'm afraid and it's okay? In which case you can use the tools of having that conversation with your brain. What's the worst thing that could happen?
Right.
Would that worst thing happen whether you do this thing or not? Right.
Right. Now, on the flip side of that, because there's some things don't push through. Like if let's say you're afraid of heights and you're standing on a bridge and your partner's with you or your best friend's with you and we're going bungee jumping today, and you were like, oh yeah, it sounds like fun, and then you get up there and you're getting ready to have like a full-blown panic attack. that's something to pause, take a step back and say, maybe someday. Not right now. This might be something I can work through. But you also don't want to push yourself into that fight, flight.
Right. Or a place of
mode.
not trusting yourself.
Exactly.
Because you instinctually knew it was something you didn't want to do, but you did it anyway. Then that creates a lack of trust in self. So it's a dance.
It is a dance. And it's not always, again, back to it's not always easy. Sounds very simple, but not always easy because you still have to take care of yourself. And if you're in that panic, fight, flight, whatever, resistance, full on resistance mode, you're not going to accomplish anything anyway.
Right.
And you will make yourself miserable. So take a step back, pause, and say, did I really want to do this, or is this because my friend drug me along and I thought I had to?
Right. Yeah. I think it's important when you're building these muscles of understanding self is take little steps, right? Nobody's saying jump off the bridge today.
Right.
Go bungee jumping, right? No, nobody's saying that. We're saying, take a little step at a time. When you're feeling resistance to something you really want to do, a low risk. Try a low risk thing like meditation. I'm having all this resistance to this. It will absolutely not hurt you to sit and meditate for 5 minutes, right?
Correct.
So
Correct.
you don't have to go into so this is a great example. You want to meditate. Practice 5 minutes a day. Don't check yourself into a weekend long meditation retreat, right? That's an extreme jump, right? So you take little steps, and you can always, or once a week, 5 minutes. Every Monday, you're going to meditate for 5 minutes. It's your meditation Monday, something like that. And then you can dial it up. After a month, dial it up. Maybe you want to add a couple of days a week, or maybe you want to dial up the time. That's how you learn to move past the resistance, and you begin to trust yourself. You're following your instincts and what feels good to you. Now, if you start this meditation practice and it's not for you, then you can try something else.
Right, and that's okay. And
Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater as far as self-care or whatever it is you're choosing to do. Try something else. And I think that's a lot of where people break down and where that justification piece comes in. Well, I tried this other thing and it didn't work, so I'm not going to bother. No.
Right.
That's not the answer. The answer is try something else because you're getting to know yourself. It's like, I like to think about it as like you're dating yourself.
Oh, absolutely.
You want to learn who you are, what you like, what you don't like. Try this. Oh, I didn't like that. I'm not ever going to that kind of restaurant again. Or maybe I won't try to eat that kind of thing. Or maybe I won't try to do this type of meditation. I want to try a different type of meditation. It's a practice of getting to know yourself. There's not a right or wrong answer.
No, and everybody is different. That's the other thing to keep in mind. Just because your best friend loves to bungee jump
Right.
doesn't mean you have to like to bungee jump. But we all get pulled into that, like, almost giving away your power. Like, somebody else knows what's best for me. And
Pleasing others, yeah.
Yeah, and that's getting in tune with your heart again, like that gut feeling, like, is this right for me? And we keep using these terms like journaling, meditation, but they're all tools for you to use to help figure some of these things out. Actually, I was struggling with something the other day and I was talking to Marnie about it. She's like, you know what I like to do? I like to put like yes on one piece of paper and no on another piece of paper, and then I mix them all up and I couldn't possibly know which one it is, and I pull that one and that's my answer. And I was like, oh, that totally takes my head out of it. That's a great idea. But it's coming up with some of those different ideas to help yourself along the way.
Yeah. We were talking about actually using a pendulum, and when you use a pendulum, you're looking at what you're looking at. And so we can very easily affect a pendulum with our mind, and our body can be like, well, I want it to be this answer. And so you can. And so when that happens, when you're resisting the other answer because you really want this one, that the best way to do it is to turn it over so you can't see it.
Right.
Which takes that resistance piece out of the puzzle, or the needing it to look a certain way being attached to the answer. Yeah, for sure.
And the other thing too is, and I want to throw this out there because the universe does love us all, but the universe also is here to help us learn our lessons that we want to learn. So, for example, the other day, I did my pendulum, I did muscle testing, and I did the papers. And the answer I got was probably what I wanted, but there was a lesson in there. It was like, yeah, go do it, but you're going to figure out it wasn't really that good for you. It was a lesson I needed to learn, and it was simply about food. It was something that I was eating that I was like, I don't really know. I'm not sure about this anymore. And I honestly, again, pendulum, muscle testing, and the papers. I did the papers, and I was like, all right, I'm just going to go with it and see what happens. And then I ate this particular food, and I was like, oh, that's why that happened. Okay, yeah, now I know. Don't question it anymore. Just go with it. But it's a process.
Right.
It's totally a process of something that we have to go through.
Yeah. And I think that's an important discussion is about we try things, and if they don't work, it doesn't mean, oh, you can't trust yourself, and you don't go down that rabbit hole of, I don't know what I'm doing, and now I need to ask outside of myself. And, it's like, okay, you had a little bump. What did you learn from that? Take that in. Where do you want to go from now, right? Where do you internally want to move from that place when we hit those roadblocks where we try something and it doesn't work?
And it also means that if it doesn't work right now, it doesn't mean that it's never going to work. We as humans are all in this absolutes, like never, ever, forever, But
always.
Always and forever. But just because it doesn't work right now doesn't mean that it's not ever going to work. And I think that was my experience with the food. Okay, I'm not questioning it. I'm doing what's for my best and highest good right now. Doesn't mean that I'm never going to eat this particular food again for the rest of my life. Right. It means for right now, it's what's best for me. And
I think that what's also important about that is if it didn't work before, doesn't mean it won't work now. So you're talking now and future. And what about the past, which is where the brain is based in, is all past experience. So if you were told not to do that, it didn't work, that wasn't right, it didn't look good on you, whatever the thing was from the past, doesn't mean it is still true now. And if there was something, if we go back to when we were children and what we loved to do, what lit us up, what brought us freedom and joy and excitement, we can find those nuggets in the present. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to necessarily be, let's say, you loved swimming as a kid. You never wanted to get out of the pool. It was the best thing ever. Maybe you have a rash to chlorine now and you can't get in the swimming pool, but it doesn't mean you can't have water around you, right? How can you take what was so joyous and important as a child and move it into the future or the now moment? How can you bring those things forward? And I think often we go, oh, well, I can't do that now. I'm a grown-up, I'm an adult, I can't do whatever. And we have a resistance to what brought us joy and what lit us up. And so reevaluate, how can you bring those things into the present moment and not resist them? Can it look different? Can it not be an absolute, well, I can never go swimming again because I have an allergy? Maybe there's a different way to approach it. And so that's part of this, like finding the true you, finding your essence, is letting go of the absolutes and the resistance to what you think you know or what you've been told.
And bring that fun. You were saying joy, that joy, that fun, you can find it again. But we are taught like, oh no, you have to grow up. You can't do that anymore. That total bullshit.
Right.
Like, no.
I think even things like meditation, which are so good for us, right? I think people have a general like knee-jerk reaction that, I have to go meditate now, right? Like I have to, like you're being put in a corner with a dunce cap and you have to be quiet. I think that's how people think of it. But it can be, when I meditate, I call it journeying because I don't sit there and try to empty my mind. I actually journey when I meditate, and I get to talk to my guides and go to fantastical places. Like that's fun.
Right.
So it can be fun. Everything that we're doing to care for ourselves, it doesn't have to feel like a job.
No, and since we're on the topic of meditation, even though this isn't our topic this week, but meditation looks different for everybody. Like the runner who gets in a zone when they go running, that's a form of meditation, and people don't realize that kind of stuff. They're like, oh, I have to sit, I have to be in a pose with my spine straight.
Right.
Like, no, that's not meditation for everybody.
No.
It can be many different things. Artists, people that paint, get in the same kind of zone. Authors, like, there's all different kinds of forms.
There's actually laughing meditation, which I think is amazing.
Ooh.
Yeah. And you could even do it while you're doing dishes, right? You can turn anything into something sacred. What the key is intention.
Right.
What is the intention when you're doing it? So anything can be a meditative process if you just intend it to be so.
Correct. And going back to our topic of this week, the resistance. You may have resistance to meditation because somebody told you, okay, I have to sit cross-legged on the floor, eyes closed, back completely straight, and I have to sit here for 30 minutes. And you're like, my back's sore. I can't get on the floor. So
How do I get up from the floor? I can't cross my legs. I lay down.
Yeah.
By the way, with an eye pillow and music and all, the whole 9 yards.
Actually, I do too. I actually meditate in the morning in my bed.
Yeah.
I get out of bed and then I get back in bed, and that's when I do
Right.
my meditation.
Yeah.
So again, it's different for everyone, but it's that resistance. And then, as we were just talking about, I can't get on the floor, I can't do this. So that's where the justification now comes in. And you can justify in a positive way, or you can justify in a negative way. But what I was just saying, like, I can't get on the floor, my back hurts, I can't. All those can'ts are your justifications, maybe for something that might be good for you.
Yeah. And
so-
we do, the brain does it. It will justify and give you 1,000 reasons not to do something different, not to change, because that's its function. I don't know what that is, so therefore it's unsafe, so therefore you shouldn't do it.
And here's 25 reasons why.
There's 25 reasons why you shouldn't do it, right? And it's really easy to be like, okay, well, that all sounds really logical. Yep, okay. And the brain is then running the show,
Right.
which we talked about last week. And you're then not following that gut, that calling, that inner true self that wants to do something different and better for yourself. So you're letting the justification reinforce the resistance to doing.
Correct. And on the flip side, there is positive justification, but we don't even need that. I think that's the other thing. We are so conditioned by everyone, like, okay, Marnie, you want to go bungee jumping?
No.
She doesn't, but
Absolutely not.
we're going to say, Marnie, you want to go bungee jumping? And somebody questions you and says, why do you want to do that? And so now you have to come up with 25 reasons to please the other person because you want to go bungee jumping. Like, no, because I want to, and it's going to be fun and it feels good. Like, you don't even need that. I want to.
Yeah.
End of story.
Yeah, we were talking about earlier when, you get asked to dinner or to go out with some girlfriends or whatever. And, we're so conditioned to like come up with a valid quote unquote excuse, something that's acceptable to people. Like, I'm sorry, I've been sick all day. I've been throwing out. How many people, raise your hand, how many people have lied and said I was sick?
Right.
And because that's like the only justifiable reason to not do something. But I don't do that anymore. Now I say, no, thank you. I can't. I'm unable. Whatever. I don't justify my no's or my yeses any longer, because I don't need to. It doesn't matter what somebody else thinks or feels about what I'm doing or not doing.
And not only that, if you say it with confidence, if you have that confidence, they're not going to question you anyway. And I think that's the other back thought of the brain going, all right, well, they're going to ask you why, and then they're not going to like you anymore.
They're going to judge you.
Oh, yeah. No, thank you. I had the same thing. Somebody asked me to do something, and I said, no, thank you, maybe next time. And it's possible, maybe next time. I just don't want to do it right now, and that's okay. And you don't need to know my reasoning.
Yeah. Which is that big leap we've been sort of talking about throughout this thread of what relationships and communication looks like, and this need to please others, and we're moving so far away from that, and it's a practice. We have to learn to stand in our own power, and if you don't feel guilty for saying no, then they're not going to feel bad, and if they do, that's on them and not on you, right?
And even if they are judging you, again, that's them. That's something lacking with them that they have to judge somebody else. And I don't think we see that. We just feel that energy of,
Oh, they're not going to like me.
right.
Yeah. So true. Yeah, I just don't. I have been out of that mindset for a while. And I think the younger generations coming up are far more comfortable saying, I am absolutely not going to work for minimum wage in your crappy job while you treat me like shit. And where we would all be like, oh, you're being so disrespectful.
Right. Right.
And we are moving out of that needing to please everyone else. And also, we worry so much about what other people think, but most of the time they're not thinking about you, right?
No,
they may
about
judge
themselves.
you. They may judge you in the moment. They may be like, "Oh, why would you do that?" And then they're off worrying about something they did, and is somebody judging them, right? We go back to worrying about ourselves very quickly. And if someone else's life depends on what you're doing, maybe they're not somebody who needs to be in your life if they're judging you for following your bliss, following your authentic self and your authentic desires and what you want to do. So resistance has this like multifaceted way.
It really does.
And it's so subconscious because it's so conditioned in us to automatically resist anything that is change. And then for us to justify why not to do it because somebody might judge us or because it didn't work in the past or it might not work in the future, right? There's so many facets to it. And all we can do is be aware of it. Okay, this is an aspect. Resistance is an aspect of life. It is an aspect of this growth process. And I learn to work with it and recognize it and move through it, past it, beyond it, whatever, so that I can be my most authentic self.
And moving past it and going through it too, again, the tool that we gave last week with the prompts is a good idea. If you are having resistance and you're sitting with yourself and you're like, I don't know why, I can't figure it out. Stream of consciousness journaling, like just write it on a paper and just wait. It's gonna come to you. Like, what is this? Is this a fear? Is this a childhood? Did I have to explain every little detail to my teachers and my parents and everybody out there in the world to be able to do something that I wanted to do?
Yeah. And when during that practice, when you are writing it out and you're like, oh, awareness is everything. As soon as it's like the key in the lock. As soon as you have an awareness of where it originated from, it's like that key turns and the door opens. You're like, oh, okay. Well, I don't believe that anymore, or that's not true anymore. Or I'm a grown ass woman. I don't have to do that anymore, right? I get to move forward. It opens the door and you can go, oh, now I can choose to walk through this door if I want to.
Right. And it's all up to me. And it's all up to you. And I think we forget that because, again, we are conditioned to give our power away to everyone else. And everybody else knows what's best for me.
Right. Which is absolutely not true.
Correct. We aren't wholeheartedly taught that we know what's best for us and everything is within us and we have the answers. Now, yeah, it's fun to bounce this off of friends, but somebody who is a true friend who has your back and isn't going to judge you and say, oh, okay, sure, go for it.
Or I wouldn't do it, but you should totally do it.
Right, exactly. Somebody who's going to be your supporter too. It's not bad to have friends. It's not bad to have somebody on your side. It's the better thing is to figure it out for yourself. That's kind of why there's a lot of, all over social media, like keep your dreams to yourself for a little while until you know the path that you're going on. I had said last week, like I hid everything from my husband, like when I first started doing this kind of work. And it's because I didn't want, and I didn't know whether he was going to judge me or not, but I didn't want to hear it at that point in time because I wasn't confident in my practices or what I was doing. And I needed to get confident with it within myself before I go telling the world what I'm going to do. So there's a piece of that too. Like,
absolutely,
sit with it with yourself.
I want to reiterate, we are sharing from a perspective of we're a little further down the road with this, but that's not the expectation of you. When you're on this path, it's your path at your own pace and whatever it looks like. And it is one step at a time. And the goal is to live your authentic, joyous life and what that looks like uniquely to you, because it isn't going to look the same for every person, nor should it look the same for every person. It is different. And so you do it slowly. You take your time, you find yourself, and then you become more outwardly vocal or more outwardly action oriented. It doesn't need to be, okay, I'm telling all my friends to shut up and I don't want to hear their advice and anything. I'm not saying you clear the board and start from scratch. You begin a little bit at a time. You start asking yourself, you start paying attention, you start taking conscious action. And as those muscles grow, the way that looks becomes brighter and more outward, naturally.
And the other thing that happens with that is you become less judgy yourself. And you're more open to people being on their own paths because you're not having that feeling of everyone judging you. You know what feels good to you, and therefore you're more open with your friends and you're more willing to accept your friends just as they are. Like, okay, you don't like that? That's fine. That's your path. I'm okay with that. And it does take a little while to get to that point. And again, everybody's at their own pace, on their own journey, but being, I don't know that kind's the right word, but
we'll talk more about self-acceptance and acceptance of others as we move down the road. There's not really a logical.
No,
this isn't really a logic. We're trying to make this as logically as possible as you step forward and move forward. But resistance is one of those things you're going to really hit pretty early on as soon as you try to do something. And so there's many facets, including judgment and self-acceptance that we're going to be diving into as we move through this series. And so keep listening, keep hanging in there with us. We'll get there because this is a journey, right? This is not a quick fix. This is not a flipping the switch and, okay, now I'm my authentic self, here I come world. This is a process. It is the life process. It's the experience of being a human.
It is. And along with the resistance, again, be easy on yourself.
Yes.
Give yourself some grace and say, if you're new, I'm new to this. I'm starting this. I'm figuring it out, and that's okay. And even if you've been doing this for a while, we still tend to forget to be easy on ourselves. Some people, as you get a little further along, are like, I should know everything. I should know all of this stuff.
I may be guilty of that.
Yeah, exactly. But we don't, and we can't ever possibly know it all, and that's okay too.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Until next week.
We will see you then.